Peppa Pig and the Plastic Cup. One day, Peppa notices a small plastic cup on the table. She taps the cup lightly, making a fun sound. George joins in with another cup, tapping along. Together, they create a simple and cheerful rhythm. Peppa changes the way she plays, making new sounds. With just plastic cups, Peppa and George create a fun and creative game. Peppa Pig and the Toy Trumpet. One day, Peppa finds a small toy trumpet on the floor. She picks it up and wonders how it works. Peppa gently blows into the trumpet, making a funny sound. George laughs happily when he hears the sound. Soon, George tries blowing the trumpet too. The little trumpet turns the room into a cheerful musical game for Peppa and George. Peppa Pig and the Strange Mirror. One quiet afternoon, Peppa and George discover a strange mirror in the garden. The mirror reflects all of Peppa's movements. But for George, the reflection moves a little slower. Something is definitely not normal. The mirror turns every movement into a funny game. Sometimes seeing things differently can be a lot more fun.
Peppa and George couldn't believe their eyes.
Wow.
A giant truck was parked right in their yard. This truck is not only big but full of strange things inside. Peppa is curious and wants to try them all. George tried to push the giant wheel, but he might need a bit more strength to move it. No worries. Peppa decides to drive the giant truck, but it seems it's not as easy as she thought. Sometimes all it takes is a little push on the gas pedal to start an adventure, even if it's a bit out of control. Finally, the truck stops, and Peppa and George realize one thing. Sometimes, the fun starts with the most random things.
Peppa Pig and the Shape-Shifting Box. Peppa notices a very big cardboard box. It looks like just a box. But to Peppa, the box feels like a secret place. George gives the box a little push and the adventure begins. The box suddenly turns into a very special vehicle. In their imagination, the box can travel anywhere. Peppa and George learn that sometimes a simple box can hold a whole world of fun.
Peppa and George ran outside to play as the rain started. They jumped into puddles, splashing water everywhere. Mommy Pig brought raincoats and reminded them, "Be careful, don't slip." Daddy Pig appeared with a big umbrella, sheltering Peppa and George from the rain. Peppa found a giant puddle, carefully jumped in, and laughed with joy. Finally, the whole family stood under the umbrella, watching Peppa and George dance in the rain, laughing together.
Peppa Pig and the Little Mirror. One day, Peppa finds a small mirror on the living room sofa. She picks up the mirror and looks into it with curiosity. Peppa starts making funny faces in front of the mirror. George walks closer, curious to try it too. George laughs when he sees his reflection. The little mirror turns the moment into a fun and playful game for Peppa and George.
Peppa and George brought the big building block set from the house to the yard, excited to start the game. Mommy Pig spread a large blanket on the grass, making it comfortable for Peppa and George to play with their Lego. Peppa started building a beautiful castle with the large blocks, while George carefully placed the smaller pieces around it. Daddy Pig joined in, trying to build a tall tower with the blocks, making the whole family laugh. Mummy Pig added special blocks to the castle, creating flags and flowers, and the whole family clapped and cheered. The family sat around the Lego castle, laughing happily and taking photos of their wonderful creation. Peppa Pig and the soap bubble dance. Daddy Pig had just finished assembling a giant bubble machine in the backyard. Ta-da! The machine started blowing countless bubbles, and Peppa and George danced while chasing them. Daddy Pig tried dancing after the bubbles, but every step he took made them all pop. Mummy Pig turned on the giant bubble mode, surprising the whole family with huge floating bubbles. Peppa and George danced around the giant bubble, reaching for it as it floated higher. The family sat in front of the porch, relaxing while watching bubbles drift into the sky.
Peppa Pig and the giant ball. Everything seems normal until Peppa and George notice a giant ball rolling straight into their backyard. The ball is enormous, but Peppa is determined because for Peppa, bigger always means more fun. The ball rolls across the grass, leaving funny circles behind, and Peppa laughs with every spin. George joins in, and together they try to control the giant ball, or at least try their best. And then, splash! The ball hits a puddle, sending water everywhere and turning the fun up even more. In the end, Peppa and George learn that sometimes all you need for great fun is a giant ball and lots of laughter.
Peppa and the Toy Treasure Chest. Peppa finds a strange little chest buried in the sand. Everyone gathers around curiously, surprised and delighted. They huddle together as Peppa opens the chest. Inside are many toys. Each friend takes one and giggles happily. They run around playing joyfully with their new treasures. By sunset, they all head to Peppa's house, still bouncing with excitement. Peppa and the Giant Blue Balloon. Peppa runs into the yard and discovers a giant blue balloon lying on the grass. George taps the balloon lightly. It makes a boing sound that makes him burst into laughter. Daddy Pig is dozing off on the porch. The giant balloon rolls into his foot, waking him for a moment before he falls back asleep. Peppa and George push the giant balloon around the yard, laughing each time it bounces high. Peppa and George keep playing, pushing the balloon back and forth, while Daddy Pig continues sleeping peacefully on the porch.
Peppa Pig and the Flying Umbrella. It looks like it's going to rain today, and Peppa has her umbrella ready. But Peppa soon discovers the wind has other plans. In a flash, the umbrella flies into the air without asking anyone. The umbrella looks very happy, as if it has always dreamed of flying. Whoa! Finally, it lands gently on the grass, satisfied after its short adventure. Peppa learns that sometimes even familiar things want to explore the world.
Peppa and George were sitting in the yard when they looked up at the sky and saw a cloud shaped like a bear. Peppa pointed at the sky and said, "Look, this cloud looks like a bear sleeping." George mimicked the bear, lying down and pretending to sleep on the grass, making Peppa laugh loudly. Mummy Pig walked over and saw them, saying, "You both are so cute, just like real bears." Peppa and George stood up and began imitating bears, walking slowly around the yard, laughing happily. Finally, the whole family sat together in the yard, looking at the bear-shaped cloud and enjoying the simple joy of the moment.
Peppa Pig and the rolling chair. A normal chair stands quietly in front of the house, or so it seems. As soon as Peppa sits down, the chair begins to move. push sends it rolling across the yard.
Yippee! Woo-hoo-hoo!
The chair turns into a short and surprising ride.
Yahoo!
After a little journey, it finds the perfect place to stop. Sometimes, even a chair can bring a tiny adventure.
Peppa Pig and the giant paper crane.
Yahoo!
After the rain, a small stream appears in the yard, drawing Peppa and George's curiosity. Wow! A giant glowing paper crane floats toward them like magic. It lifts them gently into a magical journey around the garden. It carries them through a star-filled universe with shimmering planets. At the end, it brings them home and shrinks into Peppa's hand like a mysterious gift.
Peppa Pig and the reflecting puddle. After a light rain, a small puddle shines in the sun. Peppa sees the blue sky reflected inside it.
Huh?
George touches the water and the sky begins to ripple. Peppa steps in gently, making tiny splashes. Soon the puddle turns into a fun little game. When the water becomes calm again, they see their smiling reflections in it. Peppa Pig and the bouncy ball. One day, Peppa finds a small rubber ball on the floor. Whoa! She drops the ball and it bounces up high. George happily tries to catch the bouncing ball. Peppa gently throws the ball toward George. The ball bounces back and forth between them. The little ball turns the moment into an energetic and fun game for Peppa and George.
Peppa and George decided to join a race. But not an ordinary race, it's a trash truck race. Trash trucks may not be fast, but Peppa and George can do anything when they're determined. The race gets more exciting as both trucks speed through obstacles. However, no race is without surprises, and Peppa couldn't escape this trap hole. No one wins when there are too many obstacles, but at least both had fun. The race ends, but Peppa and George realize that having fun is more important than anything else.
Peppa Pig and the strange noisy clock. Everything is very quiet until Peppa and George hear a strange sound they have never heard before. It turns out to be a clock, but not an ordinary one. It's big, it's loud, and it clearly loves attention.
Oh!
Every time the clock hand moves, the whole garden seems to wiggle along, and Peppa finds it very exciting. George decides to touch it. The clock immediately responds with an even louder sound, very much its own style. No one knows what this clock is really for, but it is very good at turning everything into a game. In the end, the clock becomes quiet, and Peppa and George realize that time goes fastest when you're having fun.
Peppa Pig and the Secret Room. Peppa is happily playing in the living room when she suddenly discovers a small hidden door behind the curtain. She wonders what surprises might be inside. Peppa pulls George close and opens the secret door. Both siblings step into the dimly lit room, hearts racing with curiosity, light peeking through the tiny window. Peppa and George quickly run down the stairs, and right at the bottom, they find a pile of old toys, cars, dolls, and the toys they once loved. Peppa and George eagerly approach the pile, their eyes lighting up with joy as they reminisce. Together, they gather the toys and head back to the living room to show Mummy Pig and Daddy. Mummy Pig walks in and smiles at the sight of Peppa and George happily playing with the old toys. She smiles with warmth and happiness. The whole family sits together in the living room, reminiscing about the fun memories with the old toys. Laughter fills the room, bringing everyone even closer. Peppa and the Little Paper Boat. After the rain, Peppa folds a paper boat. She sets it on the puddle, and it begins to float. The wind makes the boat move around like magic. Daddy Pig blows gently to make it go faster. The family relaxes together on the porch, talking about the boat's adventure.
Peppa Pig and the Little Fan. One day, Peppa finds a small fan on the floor near the stairs.
Whoa!
She picks it up and turns it on. A gentle breeze blows, making Peppa feel amused. George puts his hand near the fan to feel the cool air. Peppa places a small piece of paper in front of the fan, and it lifts into the air. The little fan turns the moment into a fun and playful experience for Peppa and George.
Peppa Pig and the Windy Hill Picnic. Today, Peppa's family goes for a picnic on a windy hill. Oh! George chases his apple as the wind blows it away. Daddy Pig's hat flies off.
Oh.
Time for a little chase. They enjoy lunch together, laughing in the breeze. And finally, they fly a kite high into the sky.
Peppa Pig and the Melting Cake. is very excited about the cake, especially on a sunny day like this. But the sun has its own plans for the cake. The cake seems to be changing shape right before their eyes. Peppa tries to save the cake, but the sunshine doesn't cooperate. Even though it's no longer perfect, the cake still looks delicious. Huh? Peppa and George learn that sometimes fun doesn't need to be perfect to be sweet.
Peppa and George were watching the clouds, and today there was a special cloud, a cloud bus. Who needs a real bus when with just imagination, Peppa and George are already flying high? The clouds looked like strange creatures, and Peppa couldn't stop imagining they were dancing with her. Not just a cloud bus, now there's a cloud elephant greeting them. The ride through these clouds was magical, and they met even more cloud friends. Although the journey was just in their imagination, Peppa and George had an unforgettable adventure.
Peppa Pig and the balloon. One day, Peppa notices a red balloon floating in the room. She gently taps the balloon, and it slowly drifts upward. Peppa and George jump up together, trying to touch the balloon. Suddenly, the balloon drifts to another corner of the room. Peppa and George quickly think of a new game. The balloon floats back and forth, turning the whole room into a fun little playground.
Peppa Pig and the Secret Garden Map. While playing in the garden, Peppa and George discover a mysterious piece of paper. Peppa opens it and realizes it is a hand-drawn map filled with strange symbols. They follow the map through the garden, exploring familiar places in a new way. Under a big tree, they uncover a small hidden box. Wow! The box reveals colorful stones, ending the little adventure with warm smiles. Peppa Pig and the Noisy Bucket. Peppa notices an ordinary bucket that doesn't seem ordinary today. One gentle tap, and the bucket replies with a fun sound. George taps harder, and the bucket sounds even more excited. Soon the bucket turns into an unexpected musical instrument. After the performance, the bucket needs a little rest. Peppa and and George learn that sometimes fun comes from the simplest things. Peppa Pig and the strange noise in the garden. The garden is calm and quiet until a strange rustling sound comes from the bushes.
Hey! Hey!
The noise isn't loud, but it's curious enough that Peppa and George can't ignore it. Peppa bravely moves closer, while George chooses a safer spot behind her. It turns out the sound was just the wind, but Peppa and George aren't fully convinced yet. And then, the loudest noise in the garden comes from George stepping on a dry leaf. Peppa and George learn that sometimes the scariest things are just in our imagination.
Peppa and the shared raincoat. It's a rainy day. Peppa wears her raincoat, but George forgot his. George looks cold and sad. Peppa worries for her little brother. Peppa smiles and pulls George under her coat. They giggle together.
Ha!
Mummy Pig brings another coat. You're so sweet when you share. After the rain, the family watches a rainbow. Peppa says, sharing makes everything warmer, even rainy days.
Peppa Pig and the never-ending puddle. After the rain, Peppa and George discover a puddle that looks bigger than usual. Peppa jumps in, but strangely, the puddle doesn't get any smaller. George jumps in too. Lots of splashing, but the puddle still won't disappear. If the puddle never ends, then the best idea is to keep playing. The more they jump, the higher the splashes, and the more fun they have. Peppa and George learn that the best puddles are the ones you can enjoy again and again.
Peppa was surprised to see a strange hat on the grass.
Whoa!
George ran over and touched it, lights twinkling from the hat.
Whoa!
Peppa put the hat on. Bubbles of light floated across the garden. Magical indeed. George tried the hat too, bubbles swirling around them, making them laugh out loud. The bubbles rose and settled on the tree branches, sparkling in the sunlight. They took off the hat, bubbles faded, but the magical joy lingered in the garden.
Peppa Pig and the Playful Wind. It looks like a perfectly normal afternoon until the wind arrives. The wind blows through the garden as if it wants to join the fun. Leaves begin to swirl around, flying everywhere. Peppa tries to catch a leaf, but the wind is always one step ahead. After After a while, the wind seems to get tired and calms down. Peppa and George learn that sometimes invisible things can bring the biggest fun. Peppa Pig and the box that wouldn't stay still. Everything is calm until a box rolls into the yard all by itself, as if it knows exactly where it's going. The box looks perfectly normal, except it refuses to stay still for even a second. Every time Peppa tries to open it, the box rolls away. Clearly it loves playing hide and seek. George tries to block its path, but the box is very good at avoiding him, especially avoiding George. In the end, the box chooses the simplest way to stop by rolling straight into a puddle. Inside the mysterious box is a very small bowl. And Peppa and George learn that sometimes the noisiest things hide the simplest surprises.
Peppa Pig and the Rainbow Rain. It's raining outside, and Peppa and George watch the raindrops slide down the window, wondering when a rainbow will appear. The rain stops, and sunlight peeks through the clouds. Peppa happily grabs her umbrella and runs outside with George to find the rainbow. A big, colorful rainbow arches across the sky. Peppa skips with joy, while George points up in amazement. In their imagination, Peppa and George slide down the rainbow like a giant, colorful slide, laughing as they glide through fluffy clouds. As the rainbow fades, Peppa and George lie on the grass, smiling softly, knowing that every rain brings a little magic. Peppa and George were walking near a sparkling, crystal-clear lake.
Whoa!
Peppa set a paper boat out on the water, and George watched it float gently. Daddy Pig brought a small paddleboard, suggesting they could have a boat race. Peppa and George paddled lightly, laughing as their boat glided across the lake. Mommy Pig stood by the lake, taking pictures and reminding them, "Don't go too far." Finally, the whole family stood by the lake, admiring the sparkling water and enjoying a peaceful moment. Peppa Pig and the Magical Garden. Peppa is playing when she suddenly kicks a softly glowing stone. When she sets it back down, a glowing sprout slowly rises from the ground. The sprout grows quickly into a shimmering magical flower bush. George runs over, and the two happily admire the glowing flowers. Finally, Peppa's whole family sits down to admire the giant flower tree. Peppa and George joyfully hop on the huge blossoms, feeling truly happy. Peppa Pig and the Umbrella of Sharing. It's raining today. Peppa opens her pink umbrella and steps outside. George runs after her without one. George shivers as the rain falls. Peppa smiles and tilts her umbrella toward him. Huh? Suddenly, the umbrella wiggles and says softly, "Oh." Sharing is the best thing, Peppa! Both giggle in surprise. Peppa and George hold hands, walking under the same umbrella as raindrops play a cheerful tune. When the rain stops, they rest under the porch, giggling together. Their laughter as bright as the sunshine after the rain. Never thought that an afternoon walk would turn into a disco under the streetlight. This streetlight is like a DJ, and soon enough Peppa became the main dancer of the party. This might be the new dance craze in the park, and maybe only Peppa can do it like that. After non-stop dancing, Peppa decided to stop. But the streetlight didn't know what giving up meant. In the end, Peppa realized one thing. The streetlight in the park never stops partying. But Peppa could finally go home. The fun ended, but Peppa would never forget those offbeat dance moves in the park.
Peppa Pig and the colorful umbrella. One day, Peppa notices a colorful umbrella in the corner of the room. Oh. She picks it up and opens it wide. George stands under the umbrella and looks up at the bright colors. Peppa gently spins the umbrella. George tries spinning the umbrella too and giggles with joy. The colorful umbrella turns into a fun little game for Peppa and George.
Peppa and the shared umbrella. It's a rainy morning, and Peppa brings her favorite pink umbrella. She sees Wendy Wolf getting wet under a tree. Peppa smiles and shares her umbrella with Wendy. They walk together, splashing puddles and singing happily. Madame Gazelle says, "Sharing is wonderful." Peppa and Wendy smile under the pink umbrella.
Peppa Pig and the Endless Ladder. Peppa and George discover a ladder that seems to have no end. With each step, the ladder looks a little taller. It feels like the ladder is reaching for the sky. Even the ladder seems excited. Suddenly, it shrinks back to normal. Sometimes, imagination is the tallest thing of all.
Peppa and George stood on the grass, seeing a big banner. funny dance contest. George did a flip in the air, making Peppa laugh happily. Peppa tried dancing to the music, but slipped on a leaf, both of them laughing uncontrollably. Daddy and Mummy Pig stood beside them, clapping and cheering them on. Finally, Peppa and George received their medals, and the whole family hugged and laughed together.
Peppa Pig and the Rocking Chair. On a sunny morning, Peppa sits on a chair in front of the house. Today, the chair doesn't seem to want to stay still. Yippee! When George joins in, the chair rocks even more. The rocking turns into a fun balancing game. After a while, the chair slowly comes to rest. Sometimes, even a gently rocking chair can make the morning special.
Peppa Pig and the Mysterious Island. Peppa and George are playing on the sand when they find an old treasure map washed ashore. Excitement fills their hearts as they imagine the adventure ahead. Peppa opens the treasure map, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. George watches beside her, and both giggle joyfully at the idea of finding a secret treasure. They cross a pretend forest and climb little rocks, laughing as if conquering great challenges. Finally, they discover a small chest hidden under a bush. Inside is a treasure of old toys and candies, and they cheer with delight. Mummy Pig steps out, smiling as she watches Peppa and George enjoy their little treasure. Their imagination fills the house with laughter. The whole family sits around the treasure chest, sharing stories and laughing together. A magical afternoon of adventure ends in happiness. Peppa and George's walk today suddenly turned into an adventure with a giant balloon. The balloon flies easily, but does Peppa have enough strength to hold on? Don't worry, Peppa. George won't let you fly too far. Or at least, that's what she hopes. Go! And then, the balloon takes Peppa higher. No way to come back. Peppa realizes that a flight isn't always smooth, but at least it's fun. Finally, the balloon gently lands Peppa back on the ground, and George is ready for his next race with the balloon. Peppa Pig and the Mysterious Sweet Box. Peppa and George spot a mysterious sweet box on the living room sofa. When Peppa opens it, the sweet smell spreads through the room.
Oh?
George grabs a treat and giggles happily, making Peppa laugh too. They try each sweet with sparkling excitement. Daddy Pig walks in, and Peppa and George happily run to share the tasty treats with him. Peppa Pig and the Dancing Leaf. Peppa finds a big leaf in the yard and picks it up. George approaches as the leaf gently shakes.
Whoa!
The leaf twirls around and dances across the yard. Wow! They imagine following it into a sparkling garden.
Yahoo!
The wind settles, and they pick up the leaf with a smile. Peppa Pig and the storytelling chair. It's raining outside. Peppa looks at Daddy Pig's old chair and asks, "Can the chair talk, Daddy?"
Aha!
Daddy Pig smiles. Of course! It has heard thousands of stories. George curiously touches the armrest. Suddenly, the chair shakes gently and begins, "Once upon a time." Peppa and George stare in amazement.
Yahoo!
In their imagination, Peppa and George go on adventures, riding dinosaurs, flying over rainbows. They wake up on the same chair, smiling. Daddy Pig chuckles. Told you it can tell stories. Everyone laughs happily.
Peppa Pig and the hat that wouldn't stay still. Peppa loves her new hat. It looks perfect and fits just right. But the hat doesn't seem to agree with its position. Peppa carefully fixes the hat, and it immediately chooses a new spot. George finds this very funny. The hat looks like it's playing a game. Finally, the hat decides to rest for a while on the grass. Peppa learns that sometimes being comfortable is better than wearing a perfect hat.
Mummy Pig teaches Peppa Pig to share food. Today, Peppa had a very delicious cake. George looked at the cake and wanted to eat it too. Peppa liked the cake so much that she didn't want to share. George looked at it sadly. Mummy Pig gently explained that sharing food with family makes meals more joyful. Peppa thought for a moment, then cut the cake and gave a piece to George. George happily ate his cake. Peppa also smiled and enjoyed her piece. Sitting together on the porch, the whole family shared the cake. Peppa realized that sharing food makes everyone happier.
Peppa and George couldn't believe their eyes when they saw a piece of bread flying through the air. They decided to chase the flying bread, but it was fast and looped around like a plane. It seemed like this piece of bread wasn't easy to catch, and it took a quick break on a tree branch. Surely this bread knew how to play tag, and Peppa seemed to be its favorite target. After an adventure, Peppa finally caught the flying bread and smiled happily. Finally, Peppa and George realized that sometimes the best adventures are when you can enjoy the fruits of your efforts.
Peppa Pig and the Flying Umbrella. A sudden rain makes Peppa grab her colorful umbrella. Today, the umbrella seems excited by the wind. A strong gust lifts the umbrella higher than expected. It spins in the air like it's performing. As the wind slows down, the umbrella gently returns. Sometimes, even the rain brings a little adventure.
Peppa and George were amazed when a giant ball rolled toward them. The ball was too big, but Peppa didn't give up and decided to push it. The rolling ball created funny circles, making Peppa laugh non-stop. George joined in, helping Peppa to control the giant ball together. When the ball hit a puddle, huge splashes sprayed everywhere, making them laugh even more. Finally, they realized that sometimes the greatest fun is just a giant ball and your own laughter. Peppa and George packed the picnic basket with Mummy Pig, bringing bread, fruit, and drinks. The family walked into the colorful flower garden with bees and butterflies flying around.
Hey!
Peppa picked a red rose. George picked a sunflower, both laughing happily. Daddy Pig lifted Peppa to reach a tall flower. Peppa raised her hand excitedly. George curiously watched a snail crawling on a leaf. The family sat on the picnic blanket, eating bread, drinking water, and enjoying the beautiful garden view. Peppa and George were playing in the park when suddenly some balloons started floating in the air. Both of them decided to chase after the flying balloons, but they kept floating higher and higher. George jumped as high as he could to catch one, but sadly, he still couldn't reach it. Peppa found a chair to climb on, stretching her hands out, but the balloon floated even further away. Finally, one balloon gently floated down near Peppa and George, and they were thrilled to catch it. Peppa and George realized that sometimes the simplest joys bring the happiest moments.
Peppa Pig and the ice cream that wouldn't melt. On a warm, sunny day, Peppa holds a big ice cream. Strangely, the ice cream doesn't melt. Even under the bright sun, it stays the same. George touches it and finds it still cold. Finally, a small drop begins to melt. Even the strangest things only last for a little while.
Peppa Pig and the shadow that wouldn't listen. It's a sunny afternoon until Peppa and George notice that there's an extra shadow on the ground. This shadow doesn't follow what Peppa does. It clearly enjoys doing the opposite. Every time they try to control it, the shadow finds a new way to not cooperate. So Peppa and George stop trying to understand it and start playing with it instead. And then, as a cloud passes by, the shadow disappears as if it was never there. Peppa and George learn that some things don't need to be understood. They just need to be played with.